helped get the box warnings on these medications then. Today, the past decade, she's been on the FDA's Psychopharmacological Drug Advisory Committee, or PDAC. This is the committee that approves medications to go to market, reviews them for removal from market, puts warnings on them. So the same committee that approved all these medications to go to market, Kim has been the consumer representative for the past decade, representing everyone in this room, honestly, at times, largely in the face of industry. And so Kim is a powerful advocate, and we're very fortunate to have her here, along with Lonnie, Jerry, and Jen Kolajic, who will be talking with us as well. So Kim, show is yours.
As Derek said, I'm Kim. I'm sitting up here, and I get the privilege, the unfortunate privilege that I have to be here in the first place, to hold space with you guys, because the issues that we talk about are not the numbers that we heard about on Bob's presentation earlier, but these are real lives. These are real lives that are being impacted by the issues that we're discussing, not just some concept. And so I didn't realize this. I am not a part of the veterans, although both my late husband was a military brat. He traveled all over, and his dad was a colonel and just recently passed away. So I feel like I'm here, and it'll make me cry because I also feel like I'm here representing the family, my family here in these discussions. So anyways, I got into this blindsided, completely blindsided by what these medications can do. My husband just started his dream job. We were married for 10 years. And it started having trouble sleeping, which is not uncommon for somebody who started his own dream job. So he went to his doctor, his GP that he's trusted. I also believe that part of it is he was a military. He believed in the power of authority, and you do what the doctor says. You did, he grew up that way. His dad, and the doctor gave him a 3-week sample pack of Zoloft and said this would take the edge off and help him sleep. I happened to be out of the country the 3 weeks he was on. I come back, he's telling me his head's outside his body, and I was like, I don't know what to, we prayed, told him to stop, prayed just to stop this head outside the body. He called the doctor, and the doctor said, you got to give it 4 to 6 weeks. Woody lasted 1 week. So I was completely blindsided. And so I wish I wasn't here, but I'm really honored to be here with all three of you, because I know that these are real lives. This is your life that was impacted by your husband, Lonnie. We've got Jerry, whose son, who also had a family. And then we've got Jen on the screen, and she was sick. I wish she was here in person, but you're here in spirit with us and on screen. But Jen lost her brother. So these issues impact the entire family, and whether it's your immediate or your family of origin. So I'm gonna ask each of you to share your story, how you guys got up here sitting on this stage that you didn't want to sit on. So I'm going to let Lonnie, you can take it away with your husband's story.
My husband, Tom, he started his military career as a Marine. After his 5-year contract, he got out and he came home drove bus from California to northern Michigan, Sheboygan area. There wasn't very many jobs up there, so he worked at a steel mill, and so he joined the Army National Guard. They didn't have Marine Corps Guard at that time. And he thought, this is great, 1 week in a month, I'm going to get a check, I got schooling extra on top of my Marine Corps GI Bill, and so he thought, had it made. Well, 9/11 happened. He deployed to Egypt, and he just got back from his Egypt deployment when I met him. A year later, he deployed to Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is where he got PTSD. He was in Baghdad, Fort Rustameya. They were bound their uranium mines. It was just a mess. Came home after losing several of their platoon members, and he just wasn't the same. We did the yellow ribbon ceremony where we were taught about PTSD, what to look for, so on and so forth. I was in the infancy stage of being in my nursing program. So, I had an idea of what to look for and what to be expected. He had a small TBI from IED hitting his convoy and so on and so forth. And so I knew what to watch for them TBIs. Fast forward to 6 months down the road, I thought he was cheating on me. He was acting so weird, and I kind of started doing a snooping, and I had found a couple suicide notes. And in my progress of looking, I had found bottle after bottle after bottle, all empty of alcohol. So I had confronted him about it. Well, he admitted he had been drinking, obviously. I thought he was cheating on me because he was acting so goofy and hiding stuff. And so I, one morning, said, hey, let's go down to Toledo, because we live in the Michigan-Ohio line. And I said, let's go down to Toledo, we'll get some breakfast. And he, oh, okay. So we pulled into the VA, and not what he wanted to be at, but I made him go in, and he got things started and spoke with one of the Legion representatives there to start getting things going. Well, VA didn't follow up, and so Tom was like, I'm done with this. A couple months down the road, he was really getting bad and in the throes of his PTSD, and I gave him an ultimatum, our marriage or he gets help. So he did follow through, and he got help. He was going down to the VA. They prescribed him citalopram and another Ambien of medications. He was probably on 4 at that time. He was falling asleep going to the store just in the corner. He was having a hard time just functioning. He worked at a steel mill for his civilian job on top of his Army jobs. So I finally went in and I advocated with him at the VA, and I told the gal, I said, you know, he can't even drive to the corner store without falling asleep. I said, you have him on double the max dose of citalopram. I said, this is not acceptable. And she was going to try and up it. Meanwhile, we had looming deployment to Afghanistan going on. And all the practitioner could do was focus on the fact that I must be something in healthcare field because of the terms I'm using. So instead of just saying, okay, we'll change it, it took me being a healthcare practitioner before the NP was willing to change his medications. At that point, they put him on Zoloft and Ambien and Prozac, all 3, and gave him a Xanax for extra anxiety. You guys noticing a common thread to us and the first panel's situations? All medications. And whilst I feel the VA has the best intentions and they're doing what they have at hand to do, it's not acceptable, it's not appropriate. So fast forward to COVID time, and everything was telehealth for my husband all through COVID and just after, until his passing. There would be times they wouldn't send him his link to log on for his telehealth visit, and any of you guys know that has had to deal with the VA. It's not like your PCP in the civilian world. You can't just call them up and be like, hey, you didn't send me my link. You have to wait until you get that missed visit appointment letter in the mail and you reschedule said visit. So he had that going on quite a bit, and the last 6 months to his life, he was drinking really heavy. That was his self-medication drug of choice. Some people it's alcohol, some people it's drugs, some people it's sex, some people it's gambling. His drug of choice was alcohol. He was up to a gallon of vodka a day on top of the Marriott caveat of 11 different pills that the VA had prescribed my husband at that point. Him and I had a talk end of October, November, and he was getting ready to have his online or his telehealth appointment with his therapist. And I said, you have to tell this lady what you're going through. You have to tell her you're drinking, you're self-medicating. I said, there's evidence-based studies that show that these SSRIs and on these antipsychotics that you're on are not effective for PTSD. And unfortunately, he did tell them, and what he was told is they'll send him yet another pill to decrease his craving for alcohol. Every week thereafter, I asked my husband who I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse of over 18 years. So mental health is my specialty. So to talk about feeling helpless is an understatement. And every week I would ask, did you get the meds for your drinking yet? No. Did you get the med to help with your drinking yet? No. And finally, he was at the worst I think I've ever seen him in his life. He couldn't sit up straight on the sofa without being fatigued and having to lay down. He was hallucinating. He'd wake up in the middle of, he worked third shift, he'd wake up in the middle of the afternoon. The one time he started driving to Battle Creek, which is where he did his drilling at, he got to Jackson from Morenci, Michigan, we're like on the border, so an hour and 10 minutes away, to realize he was hallucinating, thinking he had to go to drill, when in fact he still had to go to work that night. And he came all the way back home. So January 17th of 2022, he was in a wonderful mood. Any of you familiar with PTSD? What was okay yesterday is now not okay today. What was okay yesterday is now not okay today. And I was everything but the person I was. It was just name calling, just hateful. And it wasn't him. That wasn't the man I fell in love with. That's not the man I married. And I had asked him, I said, did they send you the med for drinking yet? And he's like, yeah, they sent it today. And I said, well, have you taken it? And he said, no. Well, then the next day, January 18th, he was supposed to have a telehealth visit. They didn't send him his link. January 19th, I woke up that morning and I had the craziest internal feeling, dread, for the lack of better explanation, dread. My husband was extra fun with my kids, super loving, extra fun. Our now 14-year-old, who was 11 at the time, had been exposed to COVID at school, and she was home doing online schooling. He had taken our now 16-year-old, who is also autistic, to the bus stop, had a good time with all of them. We got my son ready to go to daycare that morning. The whole time, daggers at me. And before I left, I got to my door to leave, and I had a sense inside me saying, say you love this man, say you love him, say goodbye. And I just stood there literally with the door frame in my hand. I don't want to say goodbye. He's being such an ass. And no. So I turned around and I said goodbye to him. We had a countertop table. I put my head on the corner of the table as he was putting my son's boots on to take him to daycare. And I said, goodbye, Mr. Hill. I love you. Try to get some sleep for work tonight. Your uniform for this weekend's drill is next to your bedside. I put it up there last night for you. He said, goodbye, Mrs. Hill. Have a good day. I know your schedule's awful. I will see you maybe later. But maybe. Didn't click. Got to that door again, and everything in my being said, don't go to work. Stay home. Don't go to work. But the dutiful nurse I am said, no, I got this patient and a caregiver waiting on me. I have to be there in 20 minutes. So I left. Fast forward to 10:30 a.m. on January 19th. I got a phone call from my now 23-year-old. He kept blowing my phone up, and finally I answered it. And the words out of that phone that I will never forget again is, Dad's gone. And I said, what do you mean gone? He shot himself. Where did he shoot himself? In the driveway in his Jeep. Mind you, with my now 14-year-old just inside the door doing schoolwork on the computer, who then blamed herself because she didn't go out and check on Dad.
It's heavy. It's heavy. It's heavy. And I know you will always remember that call, and your kids will always remember that call. And I have so much I want to say, but I can't even say because I'm sorry. Now I would like, and this was a mother that had, now we have Jerry, who's a mom of her son, and I want to hear, because you didn't live with him every day, but he's your child, and I would love to hear about your son and his life.
My son's name was Cody Camacho. He was 39 when he took his life on November. I don't know if it was the 1st or 2nd officially. It's the 2nd of November, which is when they found his body in a hotel room in Mount Prospect, Illinois. Cody joined the Army right after high school in 2000, and then 9/11 happened. He was already in Germany when that happened. Immediately, there's a lot of stuff going on if you're in the military. He was actually due to get out in May of 2004. It all gets changed because he was deployed to Iraq in March 2003 with the invasion. He was in the Army. He was a communications. He ended up being stationed at the Abu Ghraib prison, if you remember, where the big story there was the torture by some, I think they were contractors. He wasn't part of that, but that kind of adds to just the kind of things he went through in Iraq. He had severe PTSD when he came home. He didn't come home. He was married to a German, and he was in Germany, and then he came home in fall 2004. And the person who dealt with his PTSD was me, not the Army. He wouldn't go to the VA. The real problem with these young soldiers who all came back, or many came back with PTSD, is they don't want to get treatment, and they're kind of mean and surly, and nobody wants to be around them. They kind of drive people off. And he was like that. He was a lot worse at the beginning, but that was like over 20 years ago now. So he had PTSD for that amount of time. He did get better. He eventually went back with the Army he served in the Army total for 17 years. He was a sergeant, and he served as an administrator for reserve units after his active duty. He only went to Iraq once, but that was enough. And Cody dealt with his PTSD. He did self-medicate with marijuana and beer, as I like to say, as many veterans do. But he did not go for treatment. In fact, he said, well, he didn't want the paperwork. He did not want to be the stigma of being a disabled vet. And PTSD, it mostly causes family issues because, you know, he would get really mad and blow up and nobody would know what it was about, and then he'd drive around, and that was really the extent of it, but it can be really disruptive to a family if that's going on often. But other than that, Cody did pretty well. He bought a house in Des Plaines, Illinois, which he was very proud of. He grew up, he has 3 brothers, so I raised 4 boys on my own. And that's something he should have been proud of, that he was able to come out of that not having very much money, and he was so proud to be able to provide that for his family. He had 2 daughters. At the time of his death, the oldest was 12 and the youngest was 7. And very nice family. And he did get better. He had issues. He began going he started off at the vet centers, actually. About 2015 or 16, they had just come back from Germany. He'd been able to get a posting in Germany, which he actually liked to live there better. So he was back there. And he began going to counseling, and he tried first, and should be mentioned because other people have mentioned it. He first tried an SSRI, which I believe was Zoloft. And I didn't like to be around him when he was taking that drug. He was like a morose. He was very outgoing. He had the personality of like a politician or an actor, I like to say. He was very, very people-oriented. That was his whole life. He just liked people. He wanted people to like him, and he wanted to get attention. And he was like a morose zombie. It treated his anxiety, so that was good. But he eventually wanted to go off of that. And I don't know if it was from other vets he knew, but there's like a network where people can learn how to go off of these drugs because you can't just stop taking them. And that will worsen your PTSD and can cause suicide. But I remember that was about 2016 when he decided to go off of those. He wasn't on them that long. So he'd had experience with the drugs and didn't want to take them again. The VA tried to persuade him in 2018 that he should go on these drugs. And he particularly said, I've read the medical records, that's how I know this. There's a side effect called, and I hope I get this right, tardive dyskinesia. which is a movement disorder that you might associate with schizophrenics because the antipsychotics were developed to treat schizophrenia. They are used off-label quite often by the VA to treat PTSD, even though they don't, they don't have any body of evidence that I've been able to find that these work or do anything for PTSD. But in this meeting, he told him that was the side effect he was most concerned about. And in fact, shortly before his death, when he was actually taking these drugs, he described this. I said, why don't you take the dog for a walk when you feel anxious? He's like, my arms and my legs move weird, and I don't want people to think I'm crazy. So the first time they offered him, and this was 2018, his therapist or whoever, his psychiatrist, wrote, I gently persuaded Cody that he should take these. So he accepted them, but he didn't take them, because I went up there to visit, and there's like bottles and bottles stacked up. I'm like, Cody, I said, why do you have these drugs in the basement? And he's like, well, I want to show that I'm compliant. Even though legally, and there's actually a law in the books that they don't have to take these drugs, but the burden when you're accepting benefits from the VA and you're going to the VA, you want to show that you're compliant. So every time he went in there, he wanted to make sure he was doing what they thought he should be doing. So he didn't take these drugs, even though it's in their records. He stockpiled these drugs and pretended to them that he was taking them, but he didn't. And on September 27th, actually probably the 26th, he had some episode that he called a breakdown. He had been having PTSD symptoms. He actually was doing really well before that. I couldn't believe how well he was doing when I saw him that August of 2021. And a friend from the Legion, his Legion post, took him to the emergency room of Hines VA in Chicago because his behavior was so odd. And this friend thought they would admit him, but they didn't. They gave him Abilify, which is an antipsychotic. It's actually used widely off-label for other things. So he took Abilify. He went into the VA over and over during this six-week period between September 27th and November 2nd when he died. He was there the Friday before his death answering their questionnaire about whether he was suicidal or not. And they put him on another drug called Risperidone. And he was on that for a week. And on Monday the 1st, he bought his daughter's McDonald's for dinner and called his wife, who was at work, and told her he'd fed the girls, and took a gun and went to a hotel room, and no one ever saw him again. So that's when he died.
Again, feel that it hurts, like literally. I just want people to realize the brevity of what is going on. Like, it's really hard. Well, I know we're not supposed to get mad, but it's really hard not to get when I'm hearing this, and I'm hearing the number of meds just being thrown at. So, anyways, I just want to say I honor you, being the mom too, and I also know he had a wife and kids. So again, the full family. And now I want to go to Jen. Jen, you tell us you're the sibling, and so we have not heard from what it's like to lose your sibling to this. And so please tell us your story.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Jen Kalajdzic. I'm a survivor of my brother losing his life to overprescribing and mismanagement of deprescribing practices. And I'm also a licensed clinical social worker and therapist. Just to tell you a little bit about my brother, he served in the Army from 1990 to 1995. and he immediately entered the Persian Gulf War as a paratrooper. Before I kind of get into the details of what happened to him, just kind of want to tell you a little bit more about his story, just, his life. He was a loving father, an uncle, a brother, a friend to so many people in our community. We grew up in a small peninsula town about 20 minutes north of Detroit called Harrison Township. There's not a lot of streets that go in and out of our town, and everybody pretty much knows everyone. And like everybody loved him. Like he had this like amazing ability to like light up the room. He always had like a ton of energy. He'd make people laugh, and I mean he was just like the best. And when he returned home from his service in the military, he started working construction. He jumped right back into his usual passions of like hunting, ice fishing, playing hockey with his friends. And he was an excellent skater. He was recruited to play with some of the best teams in Southeast Michigan in high school. We couldn't really continue with him. My parents didn't make a lot of money, so I was like, yeah, it's like a super expensive, thing. So, but he was just really good. He excelled at like everything he did. However, one night in 1999, when he came back, he decided to go up to the local ice rink. Just, he was still playing with his friends, and they would go play on teams together. He fell down and slammed into the ice. He avoided a woman that was like coming on to the ice arena, and he shattered his leg in 4 places. So that was in 1999, right when the overprescribing of opioids was starting to increase. That was due to the FDA label change in 1997. You guys have probably heard a lot about that in the recent years. But his profile was perfect. I mean, he was blue collar, injured, they just went right after him. So, which eventually led to more overprescribing of antidepressants and benzodiazepines. So again, just a little bit more about my brother and my family. We come from like a long line of blue collar workers, veterans, including my grandfather. He fought in World War II. I mean, he was like right there in it on the ground. I was always told the story about how he had to like lie in the pit for 3 days, covered by other soldiers, because he was like the only survivor left. But he had a son to come home to, my father, and his wife waiting for him at home to survive for. So I just shared that a little bit because to highlight the fact that for whatever reason, my brother and my grandfather, my brother dove right into as a paratrooper. They were in life-threatening situations every day, and for whatever reason, they didn't develop severe PTSD despite having those experiences. I think maybe it was because he just kind of dove back in. Blue collar, we're very like get back to work and just keep going. So maybe there was some there, but he didn't. It really didn't show up at all. Like my grandfather, he arrived back home. He had 7 children. He built his own house. He was a gardener. He built, he worked construction in Detroit through the 50s and 60s, and all my uncles, everybody, worked construction. So, I just think like maybe my brother again, and my grandfather were completely happy and functional. This was before he was overprescribed medicine. So what happened over the next 19 years, though, was just like a slow descending of light going out of my brother's eyes. He continued to work construction and take opioids around the clock as prescribed to function at work. He had like multiple surgeries, his bunch of surgeries on his leg, and then it affected his back. He had like 4 surgeries on his back because his leg was shorter, and he continued to work. That's just very much our culture. So his doctors happily prescribed these medications. And of course, after we lost him, we dove into all his stuff and looked at all his records. They had him on like equaling up to like 200 morphine milligram equivalents of OxyContin, which is like, in my book, it's like that's causing brain damage, right? So like they're not supposed to prescribe over 50 MMEs. So he was 150 over the limit. So he was a little slower. He gained weight. He lacked energy he once had, but he managed for 17 years like that. And of course, long-term health problems. He probably would have developed diabetes and all that kind of stuff, because of being on it so long. But then in the mid 2016, due to the US opioid epidemic and the CDC, they published the new guidelines for primary care providers on opioid prescribing and chronic pain, payer coverages were changing, and they also implemented to be able to modify opioid prescribing behavior, where it was like, the 90s was like floodgates open. They just started shutting them down. So doctors got scared, and he started, tapering my brother off of these medications. And then they added benzodiazepines and antidepressants because, of course, we started having anxiety attacks. He became isolated. He became shaky. He was like shivering all the time, and he just was not himself. I mean, he started having strokes and seizures. Like, he would just like drop. It's like after we did the research, like benzodiazepines have these short half-lives. He'd take it here and there, and then on top of taking the opioid together, they both potentiate each other. So, he's just dropping from benzodiazepine withdrawal because of the, and that's what happens. You have seizures or you can die. So, so all that was going on. He was going to the emergency room a ton, having panic attacks, nightmares. It was just awful to see. And then during Easter of 2017, he could barely speak. He was like mumbling and drooling as he ate. It's like that was like, he's in withdrawal. He's on all these sedating medications. And my sister and I were like, we have to take our children like for a walk. We can't, they didn't even recognize their uncle who like last year was out running with him, like got them kites, was running around the front yard, totally fine. I mean, of course, was on the opioids, but he was okay. Finally, 2018, they decided to fast taper him off over the course of 2 months after they had brought him back up to the 200, because we looked through all his records, to the high dose of 200 MMEs. So brought him way back up, and then boom, just cut him off. And April 17th, he took his own life. And in his autopsy, there were no opioids in his system. All he had was Klonopin and Valium in his system. And so those two together, like being in withdrawal and then given a benzodiazepine that has the side effect of suicidal ideation, just like a recipe for disaster. So he drove to our parents' house. It was a really cold day. He had the air conditioning on. He was listening to a Christian radio station because I know he needed God that day. I know this because that's the day 2 days later, I had to move his car, and I started it, and the air conditioning is just blasting at me. The radio's on, and, the cleaning crew had to come in to move his car, so. But that day he entered my parents' home, and he sat down with my mom, and he asked her, he said, if she needed him, if anything happened to our father, would you need me? And she said his eyes were like black and empty and like really scared her. So she's like, no, I'm healthy. I'm fine. You don't need to worry about anything. However, I know in his mind that, it was like shredded from the medication, withdrawal, the strokes, the seizures. Like all he heard was that he was not needed, and he walked into the back room and he grabbed the rifle off the gun rack, and that was it. My mom just said she heard the gunshot, and, she called me, and I just ran over there. I lived like 5 minutes from their house, and it's just something I'll never forget. See my mom curled up in a ball on the floor there, and it's awful. So now the only thing that changed, from 2016 to 2018 was that he was fast tapered and then overprescribed benzos and cycled on and off antidepressants, and that led him to take his own life. He had taken opioids as prescribed with the full support of his doctors for 17 years, and despite him being a little slower, gaining weight, his senses a little dulled, he was functional, engaged, and yeah, that was overprescribing, but he was okay for the most part. But if he was never prescribed those, he wouldn't have strokes, seizures, panic attacks, nightmares, all of that. And as soon as the CDC made that change, it was over for him. He had no personal history of mental illness, brave paratrooper, was a star hockey player, hunter, reliable friend, no family history of mental illness, many protective factors, and this just nothing like this has ever happened in our family, ever.
Jen?
And, you know, since then, the CDC has reversed their tapering guidelines due to the rise in suicides between 2016 and 2019. And they published the Health and Human Services guidelines that recommends that anyone taking opioids longer than a year should be slowly tapered, no more than 10% a month. Otherwise, it puts them at risk for psychological distress or suicide. It says it right in there now. So that's tapering over 10 months. My brother was tapered over 2 months. So that was all due
Thanks.
to-
I was going to say, Jen, can I? Oh,
Sorry,
I
no.
was just going to say, I know this is the hardest thing about moderating a panel like this. I'm going to say it's really hard to not give the space and the stories of the people who have passed away. Like, these are real. And when you lose somebody like this, you go on an investigation of what happened. And then you find out afterwards what you find out that you didn't know when you're in the moment. And so I can hear you and I can see you, and you guys have done your work, all of you having to go through records of your son, living with them every single day, and then you having to piece it all together. We've got licensed social workers here, we've got a nurse, and we've got mom and all the stuff that you have done in your life. We've talked about drugs, and you've heard drug is the one theme that we've heard all single day. We heard it with the ones that are lived experiences. Can I ask you quickly, because I know we're coming to the end, and of course I had way many more questions, but I wanted to give you guys all the space because I wanted you guys to hear what it's like. What advice, is there something that you wish that you would have known, or if you could look back and do it all over, what would be the one thing you guys each wish that you would have known or done something different for your loved one?
This is his counseling sessions. He went in there and talked about family problems for 4 years worth of records. They talked about in psychiatric notes his childhood and things that happened when he was growing up. I wanted to see the word Iraq since his only diagnosis was PTSD, and I'm not a health professional, but I am a professional. I wanted to see a treatment plan for PTSD that I could identify in those records, that this is what the problem is, and this is how we're going to treat it. But I really wanted to see something about Iraq. I mean, his problems came from his service in Iraq. His wife today gets benefits because they ruled his suicide service-related because he served in Iraq, and that didn't happen.
Great. A plan and evaluation.
With Tom, I would have liked to, I'm a nurse. Just because it was COVID, I was out with my hands on patients every single day. My husband had a mental health diagnosis. He should have been seen in person. It shouldn't have been nothing but telehealth for the entire time of COVID and then surpassed COVID. When he told his practitioner that he was self-medicating with a gallon of vodka a day, I can't drink a gallon of vodka in a year, and this man was drinking a gallon a day, along with his cocktail of VA-prescribed medications. They should have asked him to come in, and he should have been instilled into a dual diagnosis program to help with his self-medication as well as his mental health issue.
Great. Telehealth, one that we've seen grow and grow and grow, and it's continuing to grow in the mainstream as well as in the veteran community. Now I'm going to ask you that same question, Jen. What would you have wished that you would have known or would do differently today?
Gosh, I mean, I wish I would have known everything, we were in it too, what's happening, I know, in my profession, the research I've done also, because I'm working also with doctors for burnout, it's still happening. I'm still working with therapists, people who are tapering. It's still going on. And me as a person individually who went through it, we were injured too at that time. We were compromised. There's research that shows when someone that you love is sick, your brain, the same part of your brain lights up as theirs of what they're going through. So my family was a mess. Like I wish we would have had help to understand, but it's like you're in it and you can't see like what's happening. All these changes from the top coming down, I mean, we think it doesn't really impact us, but here we are. You know, they make one decision and back in the 90s and one here, and people have died. And so, you know, I just, you know, I would say keep doing research and keep trying to get yourself help, you know, when things are going on like this, you know, just to help yourself, to help your loved one, you know, to
I
get
love
that support.
I was just going to say, I think that's the other theme that I heard from the earlier panel was the idea of advocating for yourself. And it's one of the things that I always like to say at the end is when I get asked, like, what would I do? No one's going to care more about you or your loved one's health than you. And so I love that it was do your research. And also withdrawal, I think our next panel is really going to be talking about withdrawal. So I think it's a perfect way to kind of wrap. I'm so honored to meet you guys, and I really, really appreciate you guys sharing the heavy stories that you all carry with you every day. And I also believe that they're with us on the other side working to help expose this. So I just want to say thank you for sharing your stories, and thank you guys for having to listen to some heavy stuff.
And a real quick plug, if you look up Silent Bob Project on Facebook, it's a nonprofit that I started in my late husband's Army name. My phone number's on there. You guys need anything, I will do whatever. If you need somebody to go to the VA with you, I will do so. That's part of my nonprofit. So please feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you guys. Thanks, Jen. I hope you feel better.
Thank you.